Why do so many smart, capable women still struggle to make the money they know they're capable of making? And more importantly, what is it that they're really stuck on? Because for years, I thought the answer was more qualifications, was more hours working, was more knowledge, was more experience gained, and working harder and harder, often doing two jobs. I thought if I just kept learning and I kept improving and I kept doing it all right, things eventually, including the money, would just follow. But it didn't. In fact, what I've come to realise is that the thing keeping most women stuck financially has very little actually to do with their skills, their knowledge, or their ability, and everything to do with their belief systems, their identity, and the patterns running underneath the surface, creating their reality. Welcome. I'm Jo, a wealth and identity mentor for ambitious women ready to rise. I help women rewire the subconscious beliefs, create the identity and the patterns that actually keep them from playing small in wealth and visibility and success. So let's dive straight in. Now, for a long time, I genuinely actually believed that, and I was shown that if I worked harder and if I continued to learn more and I collected enough qualifications, then eventually something would change. It would happen for me. It would suddenly click. I would suddenly know enough. I would be good enough. And I would be enough to create what I always dreamed of. And this would obviously show up as me feeling, comfortable, to be seen, to be able to step into the bigger opportunities, to create the wealth I kept dreaming of and seeing everybody else create in their life. And maybe you've done the same. You've invested in yourself, in your education. You've worked hard. You've done what you were told to do. You've built the experience. People probably look at you and believe you're doing actually really well for yourself. Yet deep down, you know you're capable of a lot more. Something doesn't convince yourself, does it? That you're actually feeling totally fulfilled in your life right now. Because that has been me more often than not. And you know there's another level of you inside of you, and it's screaming to come out. And that can be incredibly frustrating and creates more of that self-doubt and that worry and that fear within us. What I've discovered, both through my own journey and through working with thousands of women, is that the biggest thing holding us back isn't usually that lack of ability. It's a lack of self-trust. We don't actually trust ourselves. We don't trust ourselves to make the leap, whether that's the leap to leave the job that we're unfulfilled, to start the business we've always dreamt of, to put ourselves out there and start anew, to leave the relationship we know isn't going well. We get swept up in everybody else's life. And because we don't trust ourselves, we stay where we are, often frozen in a very, very controlled space where we no longer, we're not feeling fulfilled anymore, and we're becoming actually more frustrated, not only with ourselves, but with our outside world. And we're never knowing what to do next. Not because we want to, but because it actually feels safer to stay stuck. I know this because I've lived it. There have been times in my life when I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew I wanted to leave the relationship way before I did. Years before. I knew back then that I wanted to leave the NHS career. It wasn't fulfilling me anymore. I knew I wanted to create something incredible, which had a bigger impact for myself. But knowing and doing are very two different things, aren't they? Let's be honest. Because I know fear was the thing that was keeping me stuck hour after hour, day after day. And it kept me alone in my mind. And I wasn't really reaching out and thinking it was possible to change or I could get help. So I always believed I had to work it out by myself and do it alone. I was afraid to speak to others as they weren't in the same mindset and they were happy toodling along doing what they wanted to do. So it was safer for me to stay stuck. Now, self-doubt kept me hidden. It kept me frozen inside from taking any action or asking for any help. And I literally would kept myself hidden away. And here's what I've learned, which took me years to finally actually break through. Because confidence doesn't come first, or the how or the path to do it. Trust comes first and has to. Most women think they need the confidence before they take the action steps. But confidence is only built and created by taking those action steps itself, even when it feels scary. Now, the women I've met who have created extraordinary levels of success aren't fearless. They've just simply learned to trust themselves enough to move step by step before they had all the answers. That was one of the biggest lessons I took away from my recent trip to Los Angeles to Manifest LA. I spent time around some incredible, successful business owners, women who were in their prime, women who were able to express and just be themselves. And they had built extraordinary lives. And what surprised me wasn't so much their success as in the money or the lifestyles, the design they had created even. It was how much they trusted themselves. That energy was flowing from them. They weren't constantly looking for permission outside of themselves. They weren't constantly asking everybody what they felt or what they thought. They weren't waiting for certainty to show up at the door. And the exact pathway wasn't having to be in their view for them to take the bold steps. And they weren't worried what others thought of them anymore. That had almost gone. And they weren't trying to guarantee every outcome before making that step, before they made that move. They'd actually trusted themselves that they could figure it out. The second thing I noticed was that none of these women were trying to do everything alone. And the more I spoke to them, I realised every single one of these women that had reached that level of success, they had support in places, whether it was coach, mentors, they had teams around them, the photographers, but most of all the community. They had the home help, the cleaners, the PA, they might have a VA, social media support. But it was normal and expected because that is what they needed to help them grow. And they respected themselves to have these people. And that was a huge lesson for me because for years I generally believed I had to do everything myself. And I believed if I wanted to be successful, I had to work it all out by me. And I had to know it all. And I often got told this as well. I would always seek out the people that confirmed that was true. I had to learn everything myself of all the systems and being pushed harder, and I was just struggling. I was almost, at breaking point because I didn't know how to do it all. And when I don't know, I didn't have the guts to actually ask because I didn't believe I was worthy of more wealth back then. And here's what's really interesting. Our minds are actually always looking for the evidence to support what we already believe, what our belief systems are currently, even the ones deep down. Now, there's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. And its main job is to filter information. because we have thousands of pieces of information every second, and it shows us what it thinks is important to us. It will show us what we believe, not what anybody else believes, and it will filter so you only see exactly what resonates with your beliefs. So because I believed I had to do it all by myself and I had to continuously struggling alone, guess what I kept noticing? Stories about women doing it by themselves, being the big, bold, brave women. Messages would be bombarded about hustling harder, having to know it. People saying that you don't need the help, you can do it by yourself. And I would always zone in onto the articles, videos, and examples that reinforced the belief that success meant doing everything on your own. Now, my brain was constantly finding evidence to prove I was right. Even in my NHS role previously, I would feel a failure asking for help in certain areas, and I carried so much weight and burden and worries of others, I had no idea I never had to. It was just an old limiting belief that actually I wasn't aware was creating my reality. And that's what led me to so many breakdowns in tears trying to resolve the tech, the systems, the day-to-day struggles, which I felt so overwhelming at the time that I would just end up feeling defeated and beating myself up, believing I wasn't clever enough and it just wasn't for me. And repeatedly, I wasted years and, decades repeating this. It was hitting that brick wall with your head over and over and over, smashing yourself into it and never feeling any different because the wall never came down and I didn't change. I would just repeat it. But once I started doing this work and becoming self-aware of what those beliefs were, especially the limiting ones, I then took the power back and I could start changing that belief and become open to actually receiving the support. Bit by bit, something interesting was happening. I started noticing a completely different reality. I started actually seeing successful women who were supported with coaches and mentors and teams. And it was normal. They had communities. They had support systems. And they weren't scared to ask for them. And that's why I still realise that the most successful women I knew weren't doing this all alone. In fact, they were growing faster because they had the support. And it sounds simple. And the lesson wasn't that I needed to work harder. The lesson for me, and it may be for you, was that I needed to stop believing that I had to carry everything on my own. That was the biggest one. I thought asking for help meant you were weak. That's what I was shown, and you're stupid. I thought needing support meant I wasn't capable. So I didn't want to look stupid anymore. But the truth is, trying to do everything alone often keeps us stuck far longer than necessary. And who wants that nowadays? So if you're watching this and you're wondering why the money isn't reflecting your true potential yet, you're not feeling the fulfillment you desired to, I want to ask you this question. Journal it. Where am I waiting to trust myself? And what decision have I already known the answer to for months, maybe even years? And what action am I avoiding because I don't feel ready yet? Because often the thing what's keeping us stuck isn't the lack of knowledge, it's simply a lack of movement and self-doubting ourselves and not trusting ourselves to reach out, to take a bold step. It's when we're always looking outside for answers and for permission. when truth is something that's inside us the whole time. We've got to give ourselves permission. The women who create more wealth, they aren't necessarily smarter or have got a better business or they're more talented or they work harder. Far from it. But they have learnt to trust themselves enough to take the next step, to build a little bit more of confidence, to then get more self-trust. Because every time they do that, the trust is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there is simply one thing I hope you take away from this video is this. The life you want isn't waiting for you to actually become somebody else first. It's waiting for you to trust yourself enough to become more of who you already are. This isn't somebody that's separate from you, and it's who you always were before all those limiting beliefs created the view of your current reality, not the truth of who you are. And as you change those limiting beliefs, you're going to notice your life changes for the better pretty fast. So I want you to ask yourself, what support would help me move forward in my business? And inside, your truth will start to bubble up. And when you start to do that, the wealth, the visibility and the success stop feeling so out of reach or unavailable to you. They actually start to come closer. They become a natural result of the woman you're becoming and seeing and believing in again. You're trusting yourself. So if this resonates with you, let me know in the comments. What is one decision you already know you need to make, but you don't quite want to jump yet? So if you're ready for the support to create those new beliefs, step into the identity of who you want to become, and actually self-trust yourself enough, you'll find all the details to be able to work with me below through my coaching programs, which are helping incredible women level up, trust their own dreams and desires, and step into the version of themselves that they always were. Not because they're learning more, but because they finally realise they can trust themselves to take action for them. And that is not selfish. That is basically what we all need to do to be able to level up, to step into the version of ourselves that makes us feel fulfilled. Because there's more to life than money. There's more to life than objects and materialistic items, isn't there? There's that feeling of fulfillment, of actually you're doing something to serve humanity, to feel better about yourself. And that comes from having the self-trust, but also the identity and believing in the success that you rightly so deserve, which isn't actually that far away from you. It's just waiting often on the other side of one decision, of changing one belief, because then it starts to unravel itself. And one moment where you finally choose to trust yourself, make it today. But until next time, don't forget to subscribe, hit the button so you don't miss out any future videos. With much love and gratitude.